Hello, welcome to Philosophy, Science, and Religion. I'm Chandler Klebs. I'm here with Poffo Ortiz and Slattery. And today we're going to have a continuation of a sort of discussion or disagreement or debate, whatever you want to call it, one of those D words, about the use of language and the use of certain words, because repeatedly in our previous podcasts we've had disagreements about when somebody uses the word, God or divine or spirituality or something like that, And because these words mean different things to different people and have a certain meaning in the context of Abrahamic religions, I tend to find them problematic and confusing, and I know Slattery has a somewhat similar view on this, but Poffo and Peter Moriarty have a tendency to use these words, and I think they have some good intentions and good reasons, but I think this is a question that we can explore. Say, what effect does the use of the word divine have? What effect does it have when you call the universe God? What effects on the psychology of people does this have? And so this is an open question that maybe we don't have the answer to, but it's worth talking about. Oh, cool. Looks like we got Peter now.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, yeah, that's totally fine, Peter. We were hoping you could join us. We now have Peter Moriarty, because we're going to be talking about the use of language and these words. There's been a disagreement, as I'm sure you've been aware. Some of it's been in Poffo's Pantheism Facebook group. Let's see. Oh, yeah, and Poffo just sent a message in the chat. Let's see. Yeah, your camera is still on, Chandler, just to let you know, but keep it on so I know if you want to interrupt me. Yeah, I'll just keep my video on, guys, so you guys can see me in case I need to interrupt something.
Since I do, this does become an issue, because we can't see each other as we begin to start speaking. It actually might help where people who tend to ramble on, like myself, like Peter. You can kind of signal, and I can see you, Chandler, and you can let me know when you want to butt in or if you need to say something, and I'll stop.
Yeah, that'll be a much more efficient way. So here's a good way we could get started on discussing this is Poffo or Peter, you both can answer this from your different philosophies about what place do the words God or divine or spirituality, like how do you use these words and what effects do you believe they have?
Do you want to shoot, Peter, or do you want me to go first?
I guess I could start out. It's fine. Chandler didn't ask who should start, but
either
sure.
One's fine.
Well, I think it was at the very beginning of our discussions that Poffo and I agreed that when it comes to using the word God, that really you're not going to be able to get around it completely, and I think it's important to be comfortable to continue to wield this term. However, we've both come up with our own alternate language because I think we're both pretty convinced. A number of different voices, especially I think for me, Terence McKenna is very much about the idea that the language that we use programs our thinking and that we should be quite selective about the choices of our terms so that we don't convey misunderstandings from the get-go. So we've basically both come up with our own terms for what we call, or at least aspects of what we would consider to be God, or so. That word could mean so many different things that I think it's necessary to use particularly, specifically a couple different terms depending on which God we're speaking about. And I don't mean which God or goddess. I mean, you know what I mean. The word is
which concept of God, like which idea, because there's so many. It's as big as the notion itself, Everybody has their own concept of God. But here in the West, essentially what we're talking about is the monotheistic, anthropomorphic, personal, intervening.
Usually that's what people are talking about, but that's also whenever you talk to somebody who knows. Basically, if you assume somebody doesn't know what they're talking about, then they're probably using the word God in that way. Otherwise, when I don't tend to fall into those circles. So when I'm in the circles that I'm with, I know when somebody's saying the word God that they mean something entirely different.
That's a good point. That's actually a really good point, that it all actually depends on who you're talking to. So, I mean, if you're talking to a Christian, if you're talking to a Muslim, if you're talking to a pagan, if you're talking to a pantheist, like literally it's dependent upon the audience or the person that you're interacting with, and then you can actually, as pantheists, I've found that you use whatever language essentially they can understand and whatever they best relate to. In speaking with Trick, I could completely have a conversation just about nature, the universe, the natural world, the laws of nature, the laws of physics, the cosmos. That's it, and never ever invoke the term God or divinity or Dios, any of that stuff. So, and then of course in pantheistic circles, we use it interchangeably. We say the all or the universe, or we say nature, and of course, Peter and I have come up with our own specific terms for those reasons he mentioned. His is the omnium, and mine is the omnia. I can explain what mine means. Essentially it's Latin for everything or all, and I just think it has a nice poetic sort of sound to it. It's almost feminine in aspect. It kind of evokes the divine goddess kind of feminine omnia, because in classical Greek and Roman language, the female names always ended in like ia, or that sound, and then male names always ended in s. But anyway, so the omnia, it's just basically everything, all that is, and I use that to mean essentially the life principle that pervades all things, and also concurrently it means the actual manifestation of that life principle. So the totality of all that exists, the universe, nature, the earth, all animals, all plant life, everything. So it just means everything. And I can let Peter explain what omnium means.
Okay, sure. I think that one of the things that might confuse people about my philosophy or religion, or what's actually more correctly a meta-religion, is the idea that I'm actually a pretty hardcore atheist in a lot of ways compared to, considering what a lot of people think. But I am also very much into the idea of imagination and where we can get lost into. When I say lost, I mean caught up in our dream reality to such a degree where it becomes the primary focus or the primary lens of experience. And I think that in spite of the fact that you can exist and believe, put aside some of your rational doubts, just like you would do in a movie, you can do that with reality. And I think that's when you really engage with what reality is best. So basically getting back to that, my concept of omnium is actually the word unum in there. And I was just having a conversation with a very stark rationalist and materialist reductionist. And I merely said to him that omnium is singularity. I didn't even use the word omnium, but the singularity aspect of this has to do with the fact that it is really more of a principle and not an entity of any sort. And that's why I can often just completely circumvent the whole word God and talk about things like a divine ground, or not even use the word divine, but you could say eternal ground, an undifferentiated foundation for reality, or basically what I consider it to be is omnium represents the ground of being, and it has no personality or no movement in itself. It is changeless and infinite. And to consider it something that would be a concept of a God that is present but completely uninterested is really not even applicable. I think that's more anthropomorphization. I'm very interested in getting away from anthropomorphization, because I do think that it's a complex thing about what we talk about when we say God, or whether we say that basically this is some mind or an entity. And yet I think that a principle can actually be in other words, a force or non-force of nature can actually be a factor in mind that creates the opportunity or possibility of everything that we know, but not actually be a living thing. Does that make sense? So in other words, it's basically the seed of life, but it is not alive. It's the seed of mind, but it is not a mind. It is the seed of entity, but it is not an entity. And that's basically where I start with in my ontology. Is this? I remember
reading in your OPBT, your introduction to organismic philosophy and biotheism. You basically said the omni unum represents the allness, the oneness, and the noneness. Maybe I said it in the wrong order, but the allness, the noneness, and the oneness. So yes, it's like
exactly.
It's omni is all or everything, and then unum is one. So it's like all in one, with no physical body. Is that a good way to explain it? Good way to describe it?
Yes, it is meta-phenomenal. It is not a part of phenomenon, and yet it is the underpinning of all phenomenon. And I guess the reason why I point this out is because it's not that I have a problem with your poetic usage of the word omnia. I think it poetically is not bad, and I think it's actually most easily accessible to most people's thinking. However, I think when it gets down to some of the philosophical guts, or the thing under the hood, I'm just concerned that there's still too much of an ability to assign either personality or some intentionality through this concept of the omnia, whereas I feel that the intentionality does not come from some spirit or entity of the universe so much as it comes merely from our human evolution.
Right, and this gets. I mean, we're getting some deep stuff here, but
yeah.
So, really quick though, that's the distinction between Peter and I also lies in the fact that this is very complex. So let me just get this out real quick, Trick. I know you have a lot you want to say, but it lies in the fact that I'm also partly a pantheist, okay, and so I am coming from the idea that existing outside of time or before time, there was the ultimate consciousness, the infinite consciousness, which is what George is actually referencing, that he believes exists right now or could have possibly existed before life began. I believe that consciousness exists at all times outside of time, and it's essentially where we came from and where we're headed into the future. So I agree with what Peter's saying. I agree with atheists. I agree with what agnostics or secular humanists would say. Religious naturalists, scientific naturalism, what Peter would say, in that there is no conscious God, there is no infinite being that exists right now. There is no theistic God presently at this time that is self-aware. It is becoming aware through evolved conscious life, and that's where me and Peter agree. We just disagree on the origins of it, but what the nuance part, it's funny coming from me because he's usually the one that's focusing on the nuance aspects. The nuance of it is what he is focusing on in terms of how human beings are the manifestation of that, conscious life, self-awareness. That's where we're headed, and I agree. And I'm saying that's where we're headed because that's where we're going, and that's where we came from. It's actually a cyclical model in my ontology. It's a cyclical.
So to be clear. You basically believe that there was at one time like a universal mind, some kind of entity that's a little bit closer to the concept of a God of the Abrahamic religions. At one time.
Yeah, you kind of broke up. You kind of broke up a little bit there, Chandler.
But you get what I'm saying. Like that. At one time, there was an entity, a mind, a more godlike thing that existed at some time. But you're saying it doesn't exist in that form now.
Sure. A better way to explain it, I could say that God exists at all times in different forms. So the conscious, universal, coherent, cohesive mind that people would normally assume is God, the God of the Bible, essentially, the personal God, the conscious God, no longer exists, does not exist right now. But it's not that God has annihilated itself and it's gone forever. It existed before the Big Bang. It's what initiated the Big Bang, and it's where all of evolution is driving life back toward self-awareness and a cohesive, universal, collective mind. And this is all obviously speculation and theory, but it's my extrapolation drawn from observing biological life and the trajectory of where all organisms are headed toward greater and greater levels of consciousness. So we've talked about this many, many times. But honestly, I don't want to get too these are our doctrines, our theologies, and I didn't really get too much into that. But I just do want to say that I don't know if Peter has ever really fully comprehended my take on it. It's just we believe the same thing. We're just looking at different perspectives of the same thing.
Do you guys believe
part of it?
Do you guys believe the same thing? Like Peter says that there's a seed of mind, which is a completely different concept than a pantheist concept. So I don't think you guys are saying the same thing there.
Yeah, because that seed. Did you say seed or seed?
A seed.
That seed is immanent in all energy matter. It is the latent memory of this consciousness that existed pre-Big Bang. So that seed.
Well, let me
exists.
just interject, because I think that we do agree on the outer parts of it, but just as Trick points out that at the very nuance of it, the difference is I don't know if I disagree with you as much as I think that maybe my view is. It may sound more poetic, but I think it's actually more literal in that I think that this place of unity, or of when the universe understood itself, I see that as being a singularity, but not a place of conscious awareness, but a place of it's an intuitive knowledge that all things come from the same source.
Yeah.
Therefore, they have a certain kind of recognition of each other, and there's a certain completion in this absolute simple singularity. There's a place of completion from which we all emerge, and to return to that state of completion, I think that all matter, is seeking to equal its valences out. It's seeking for higher and higher levels of completeness. Now, if we come from a place of pure simplicity, to return to that, we may never be able to return to that until we ourselves are pure simplicity. But we can also create systems that in their completeness, they may be complex machines, but their completeness itself emulates a type of inner simplicity and completion. And so I think that every movement towards completion is a movement closer to this original singularity. But it can only be an emulation because the singularity has no parts. That's how I see it. But I do.
I mean, can you guys?
Well,
do you guys
as
realize
soon as
that we basically just said the same thing, just using different words?
No, because as soon as you talk about there being a consciousness at the start, then you're talking about something different. You're talking about you can actually use, you could say the word God, and I'll say that actually works for that conception. If there's a consciousness at the beginning that starts this whole thing, then I would equate that with I wouldn't say that God is problematic in that aspect, because that would be a God, which I'd say there's no, as an atheist would say, there's no evidence for.
There is no evidence for that consciousness. That consciousness existing right now in a state of conscious, volition and discretion. There is no evidence for it because it's never existed in the history of our universe. That's the point. But it is the source of our universe. The point of all this is, okay, really quick, because I know for the listeners and whatever, this is very, very deep. Let's try and make this very simplistic. I'm saying, and I have always believed on some level, okay, that very, very simplistic. The fact that all energy, matter, and life is becoming conscious leads me to believe that consciousness will be the end result of all of this.
I kind of need to stop you.
Okay.
when you say all matter and energy is becoming conscious, I don't see any evidence of that either. There's a specific set of matter and energy that has evolved consciousness, but the majority of matter and energy isn't becoming conscious.
Okay, Trick. Very, very, very clearly, and I'm going to try and make this. I know you have trouble with this. You're looking at the external world and the universe and the cosmos in terms of phenomenon and physics, and you're judging because of the time and the distance and the space between the manifestations of life. Like for example, like we've never made contact with an extraterrestrial. I mean, of course, aside from all the reports and whatever that's unsubstantiated, but we it's never been officially known. We've never contacted another life form outside of our solar system, our star system. The point is, because of that, it seems improbable, and there's all this time and distance and space in between. But I'm basing it off of the immutable, perpetual, impermanent laws of nature that are operating in the same way everywhere. So if it happened this way on this terrestrial globe, on this planet, then why would you think it's not going to happen in any other place in the galaxy?
It could. We don't have evidence of that it does.
Hold on, let me finish. Hold on. Why would you think that it's not happening everywhere, and that the same process essentially, like, you just have to follow the trajectory of where this is headed. It's moving back towards singularity, toward a universal consciousness. The internet is a perfect example of that, of how everyone, it's the combined collective resource of all human knowledge. I mean, that's a perfect example.
Let's take the sun, for example. We know that the sun most likely doesn't have life or anything conscious within the sun itself. We know that it's really uninhabitable. You're not going to evolve any creatures on the surface of the sun or the core of the sun. So that's a specific part of the universe that will never be conscious, as far as we.
That's an assumption, but yeah, it's a good one.
Well, yeah. I mean,
go ahead.
We would have no evidence of the sun being conscious, right? So the universe is filled with empty space. It's filled with all these really uninhabitable aspects to it that will never evolve.
But it's also completely filled with the same laws of nature that allowed this trajectory of life to take place. So,
if I could just interject, I think what he's saying though is that these laws of nature, they may be ubiquitous throughout the universe, but that doesn't mean that consciousness, because it is expressed by us, advanced monkeys, that every stone and every star is a conscious being. And I think that you obviously already agree with that.
That's panpsychism. I don't believe that. No.
But I mean, I think this is also where it's important if we're talking about how we use language. This is why I keep on saying that pantheists are a little bit hamstrung in this discussion of consciousness, because we keep on trying to apply the word consciousness to things that don't. And, we can pretty well grasp that the sun is not a conscious being, but it is this radiant thing of light that we want to equate with consciousness. But I do think that, as Trick is saying, that it's problematic for people to go around saying that consciousness is something that's within all things, that it's within stones. Now, before I
agree, I agree with that. Peter, you and I agree on the levels of consciousness: awareness, sentience, sapience, consciousness. We're already in agreement about that. We don't believe that everything is alive. I'm saying everything has the potential to form conscious life because of the laws of nature that are in effect everywhere.
Because I'm going to include you in this, because I don't think that people know that we have already had this discussion, and we agree that. So not only is the language of God important, I do think that the language of science and this new realm of the language, it's especially important, is where we cross over between pantheism and pantheistic spirituality, or basically a worldview, because I don't really consider it necessarily spirituality, and science. And this word consciousness, it's probably, I think that consciousness is this place, or it's the bridge between science and spirituality, and we have to be careful about how we use these words. That's why I think that the word that using new language to differentiate between what I call awareness and what is consciousness could provide the type of key to unlocking a way of understanding that how greatly different the two things themselves are, and that consciousness is something that is emergent. It's an aspect of brains and entities and minds, whereas awareness could be basically more of a general valence, in that we could say that all of the matter in the universe has no consciousness. However, can we say that the matter itself, because of its own urgencies of valence, because of its just place in the universe, can we say that it is not aware? Now, awareness may be something that cannot record itself, cannot perceive itself. So what if
we talk about problematic words, and when you say like there can be an awareness that isn't connected to consciousness,
yes,
I'd say that's a problematic use of the word awareness.
Okay, so that's why I want to try to introduce this notion that the word awareness should be, in this particular model, viewed as this radically new way of looking at awareness, to say that basically that the positive and negative valences of quanta and other types of of an atomic valence, that is awareness of that molecule of its own incompletion, of its own incompleteness, and that awareness is not sensual. It has nothing to do with nerves, has nothing to do with mind, but that it is a how can I say, a placement, a subjective placement within the universe that I would say. Now, here's what's complicated about my view, is that I do consider myself both an atheist and a panpsychist at the same time. And panpsychism would say that every atom, every quanta, everything that is in a state of incompletion or in a state of valence, positive or negative, is basically aware of its need to complete itself. And so it is on a mission to do that. Not a mission, it's just its own particular position in the universe, and at every position has its own.
Panpsychism itself actually says that everything has some aspect of consciousness to it. So you, right. I mean, if you're going to go to the panpsychist level, then yes, you can say awareness, because it follows from panpsychism. But I don't think there's any evidence for panpsychism, and if there was, then yeah, we could use.
It's becoming.
We've discussed this before, Trick. Can I interject? We've discussed this before, Trick. What Peter's talking about and what I'm talking about is just the ability for particles of matter to react to other differentiated particles of matter. The fact that the way that atoms, molecules repel and attract each other.
Causality needs no awareness. So we could just say causality there, but that doesn't need.
We're talking about the on the minutest scale to the macro.
Yeah.
Okay. The fact that forms are separated and differentiated, and they are in, juxtaposed positions from each other instead of just being one thing, but the molecules are vibrating at different frequencies. That is the level of awareness that me and Peter are talking about. There's a level of awareness to everything.
When you're talking about lower levels like that, you're talking about physics. Yeah. And in physics, there's no need for the language of awareness at all.
I'm saying you're wrong. I'm saying that that's wrong. Is that actually it's important in physics, and as we know through quantum physics, that the observer is absolutely important, and that
no, that's wrong.
Trick listened to the New Age stuff, so he's a real stickler for that.
That's wrong. Consciousness doesn't cause collapse. That is not, the observer effect does not mean consciousness causes a collapse. That's a incorrect theory of
consciousness is connected to the phenomenon. It is becoming more, and I just read an article about this the other day, that the panpsychic argument is becoming more and more of an accepted hypothesis. I didn't say that is proven. It is on my own. I would call it a type of good faith that basically I see this as being the truth of things. However, I don't expect to just
there's
be
one
saying
philosopher that I know of that has the panpsychic thing that he's a pretty decent philosopher, Strawson. So he argues for panpsychism, but I think his argument
many
fails.
people argue for panpsychism, starting with Plato.
But I mean,
Whitehead proposed it. So did Max Planck.
Guys,
we're talking about
I don't want this to get into endless, sort of.
Yeah.
Let's stay focused for a second here.
Well,
I really want to
here's the deal. We're talking about the problematic words, but here's the thing, because we can't really talk about the problematic words anymore because of the things you guys are saying.
Because we're redefining it. Because we're redefining those words. Those terms.
Those are things that you can say are God, or can say are conscious, or can say are aware, or so you guys are talking about things like when you say pantheism, that is that is God. So.
Yeah, I've been listening, guys, and
coming from a more pantheist perspective.
Yeah.
But I do think that this conversation about the idea of changing language, we started out talking about God, and now I'm turning it around to say that physicists also need to check their own dogmas, and that basically how we use language is based on certain dogmatic assumptions. And I do think that this idea that consciousness and awareness are one and the same, that's one of the things that I personally take as an assumption that needs to be challenged. And really, it's not about challenging you guys right here and now. I'm more or less trying to say that, as we come to understand new ideas, we have to evolve our language and evolve how we use it, and sometimes start to use language in a way that is completely contradictory to how it was used.
See, this is why I appreciate you guys when you guys like change up words and you say something like omnia or omnium or something like that. You guys are actually creating your own word to display what you mean, rather than using a term like God that has all this baggage in it, and the majority of the population is either Christian or Muslim or something like that, and they have these other conceptions of God. So you guys are changing up, which is good. I think this is what should be done. But when you use words like awareness, that is, I mean,
I got it. Trick. I got it.
Okay.
We've talked many times. Listen, I got to get this out. My head's gonna explode. We need to all take a step back and think for a moment what our motivations are. Okay, each of us has a motivation. Each of us has a specific driving principle that we're leaning towards. And this is why in my very first discussion with you, when it was just me and you, Trick, on your show, I said, we have our own sort of agendas, and if we can just get to the universal ideas there, we'll see that we're actually much more aligned than you think. There are specific reasons why Peter, takes his approach, and there's specific reasons why I take my approach. I want you right now, just real quick, we're going to go around the room, kids, and we're going to I'm going to tell you why I speak the way I do and I think the way I do, and I want Peter and Trick to do the exact same thing. Or I could just summarize it really quickly. I know that Trick is very wary of New Age mysticism, and he wants to sort of quell all the superstitions and the false concepts essentially that lead people to delusional thinking. I know that he is a realist on many levels, and so am I. I know that Peter has specific issues with empirical science and modern sort of reductionism and stuff, and so he is trying to approach it with his agenda. I have my own reasons for why I'm attempting to sort of redefine terms and use religious language when speaking of the natural world. So let's just take a step back for a second. I don't want to get lost in semantics and linguistics and terms and just this word jumble that we get into, that many intellectuals and philosophers get into. It's counterproductive. Like, we have good intentions, so let's state those intentions and sort of move from that place of understanding why we're actually on this path, on this trajectory. Do you follow me?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a few things to say too. Yeah, see, I've been listening to you guys, and a lot of this has just been going way beyond me. Like, because, Poffo and Peter especially, like, your philosophies or religions, whatever you call them, are still very new to me. And here's what I've had very limited exposure to pantheists or pantheist-like people. There's only been George and you, Poffo, and you, Peter, are the only ones who take any type of pantheism seriously that I know. And what's interesting about it is that, like, as you guys know, Richard Dawkins refers to pantheism as sexed up atheism, which is a very interesting thing. But what I'm wondering here is if we're just experiencing a semantic difference in words, that we're just using different language to talk about the same things, or is your belief system what you guys actually believe, or what pantheists in general believe, is the belief and not only the words but the actual beliefs different than your typical atheist?
I would love to address that, and the way to address that is in two ways. And if you guys can just be patient, I'll try to make this as concise as I can.
Just try to give everybody a chance to speak their mind.
Well, no shit. I mean, that's what we're trying to do, man.
Yeah.
Some of us are trying to.
I'm trying to, create more, communication and cohesion here, so we don't get lost in the verbal diarrhea. Look, not that anyone is speaking verbal diarrhea. I'm just saying, like, it can become very confusing and convoluted, and sordid. Okay. Pantheism in and of itself, like, it's not an organized movement. It's a set of ideas. It can be a philosophy. It can be a theology. It's found within many of the world's religions. But at its core, it essentially equates the universe with God. It says God is the universe. Okay. Now take that, just starting from that starting point. Okay. This is what I have done. Okay. God is the universe, or the universe is God. Okay. If the universe is God, then that means nature is divine. If nature is divine, that means all life is sacred. If all life is sacred, that means we should love and respect everything. We should love and respect all living organisms, all biological life. Peter was the one that sort of steered me in this direction, but I always had it intuitively, because I've always been an animal lover. I've always loved the outdoors. I've always felt closest to God out in nature. Essentially, we're not coming from the starting point. I'm not coming from the starting point that I believe in God and I'm trying to fit these ideas into it. I was agnostic. I was basically an atheist. I'm an anti-theist, actually. I'm still a really strong anti-theist. I'm basically saying nature is all that exists. Nature is all that is, okay? But nature actually contains the qualities and the aspects that are typically attributed to God. And we can go down the list of all these things. And I've done this before, but it's problematic for Trick. But I'm going to keep it concise. Essentially, what my belief system, what my doctrine, what my theology and my focus and emphasis on is in helping people to recognize our essential unity, the essential interconnectedness that we all share, the brotherhood of all, of all living creatures, and the sanctity of life. I put the focus and the emphasis where it should be on biological life in the physical world, because I'm a naturalist. So that's my form of pantheism. It's bio because it stands for biology. It stands for life. It's biopantheism. Essentially, God is all of life.
Well,
instead of just saying that God is the universe, instead of just saying that the universe is divine, that's very abstract. So it's like saying, if the universe is divine, what are the movement of the universe, the qualities of the universe, the characteristics of the universe? They're manifested through nature locally. So nature, it should be the thing that we revere and we hold sacred.
Conversation.
I'm trying to say that it should be the focus and the importance, and that's where I'm coming from. That my pantheism is to promote and support love and respect for biological life.
The question was, what is the deal with the actual reality of pantheism now, and how does it compare to Dawkins' explanation that it's merely atheism, sexed up atheism? I think that your answer is fine for your philosophy, but it's
wasn't answering anybody. I was just making a statement so we could understand where I'm coming from. But we can address the question if you want. I wasn't even answering anybody's question. I'm just trying to have a platform to start from.
We're answering the question to start with. Trick, did you want to just say something?
I just wanted to mention that this conversation is about the problematic words that we're concerned about. So Poffo had that long talk, but he in that talk he used 3 problematic words that we need to go over. So it was God is the universe, nature is divine, and all life is sacred. So sacred, divine, and God are the 3 words that are the concern. I know, Poffo, you have a lot to say on this. I know.
I can get this out. Keep those
Poffo,
words.
I know. I've heard you
go down the list. I'll answer you. I will give you definitions for each of those words.
Well, can I answer Chandler's question? Because I can't.
Yeah, why don't you answer Chandler's question, and then we'll get back. But we have to get back to these problematic words because
I want to answer. I want to answer and define those words.
Okay, well, let me just say this: is that first of all, neither myself nor Poffo nor any of the other people who are prominent on the pantheism page get to define what pantheism is and what pantheists think. Because I can tell you how many times that I've had a conversation where a pantheist, is pretty much considers themselves the best example of pantheism on the page, and they tell me that the word God itself is nonsense, and that everything that we would, use in terms of divinity, sacred, so on and so forth, that's all nonsense. So you have the range of people.
They're all different, yeah.
There's so many differences. You have a range of people that are pretty much straight up atheists versus people who go all the way to being pretty hardcore deists and pantheists. So that's part of the problem that Poffo began to address, is that pantheism itself doesn't have a central philosophical, very specific, unique core. It is a wide range of things, and that is why I think that when it comes to this idea of language, not only in terms of the word God, but in terms of the word pantheism, Poffo and I both decided that the word pantheism is problematic for this reason. So we've moved on to our own word. His is biopantheism, mine is biotheism. So there doesn't have to be this constant, this school is like 50 different things, and which one is it? I don't know. At least
it's like, that's not pantheism. That's not pantheism. This is pantheism. Well, how many posts were there in Perry's page of how do you define pantheism? So what does pantheism mean to you? It just is endless. It's still going on.
It always goes like that.
It's continuously. Everybody has their own take on it, basically.
And that's what I wanted to say about that particular topic. But moving on to the Trick's question, not all of us use the word divine or sacred in the same way. I think that it's important to, start getting away from words like divinity and sacred to start understanding what is the mechanism there, because I think Poffo is talking about a mechanism that all of us share. I think everybody in this circle right here, or this square, is 4 people, cares a lot about the universe. So I think that whether we call it divine or sacred or what, I would say that intuitively we all understand it, because if we care, we're already exhibiting the necessary behavior.
See, Peter, I have the opposite reaction to it. Like when someone says nature is divine, that to me is a very problematic sentence. It's a sentence that doesn't denote the reality of what nature really is.
Because you're only looking at the cruel realities of nature.
No, I'm looking at both. But if you're looking at the crude,
right.
if you look at the crude reality, you can't say that part of nature is divine. You can, but it makes the word trivial. And
the good doesn't outweigh the bad for you. I know the good doesn't outweigh the bad. Like
even if it didn't, if it did outweigh the bad, it wouldn't matter. Even if it was just only a small fraction of this negative that was really horrible, that in itself cannot be considered divine. We can't say
let's go down the list. Let's go down the list and ask me those questions, and I'll answer you as fast as I can, and then I'm going to tell you why I might choose to use those problematic words. Go ahead. Do you remember the words?
Let me just say, just as a thought. Although I agree to say the universe is divine is problematic. I would also say that to say the universe is not divine is also problematic. That's it.
Yeah, well,
I have an analogy when you
could say
guys are
parts
ready
of the
for it.
universe is divine, or parts of the, but I wouldn't even use the word divine.
I gave you the perfect analogy, Trick. I said a baby, a newborn baby. A newborn baby is precious and beautiful, but it's also shitting all over itself. Okay, a newborn baby has all the potential to become a talented, articulate, like passionate human being that contributes to society, but it also can't even speak. And it has no concept of what a microprocessor is, and it doesn't understand anything about what's going on, on the other side of the world right now.
And it's also less harmful than most people are. Most
sure,
adults.
Sure.
So,
but it can also be harmful if you put a baby with a little with an animal and it doesn't understand the concept. That you need to be gentle. It'll poke its eyes out or it'll hurt it. You've seen that. There's a point I'm making here.
So you're equating innocence. You're basically equating innocence with divine, which is not the same thing. Like we could say the universe is innocent because it's just
I'm using the analogy to say that the mind, the moral and ethical consciousness of God has not yet developed. It's in the process of developing. So what you see when it's kill or be killed, survival of the fittest, dog eat dog world, natural selection, you're seeing basically an infinite being that is like that is just going through the motions, not yet learning that these things are harmful, that there's a different way to do things. It's just now learning that cooperation and consideration and compassion and altruism are a better way to coexist and sustain itself.
The fact
I
that
might make this. Oh, go ahead, Trick.
That there's extreme suffering, extreme pain, to like these really, really high levels. You can't. I mean, there's no. It makes the word divine trivial to say suffering is divine.
I've never said suffering is divine.
It's part of the universe. Suffering is part of the universe. Yet you're saying.
Well, okay. Now I have an analogy here, guys. Now, see, imagine instead of the universe, we're talking about a chessboard, and somebody comes along and says that the universe is black, which is true, but only certain parts of it are black, and the other half of it is white. And so I think what's interesting and problematic about the universe, when we're talking about the universe, is that includes everything, but there are some things that would be divine and other things that would not be divine. And so it's important to not be misunderstood as if we're calling everything divine, right?
It's called selective abstraction or mental filtering. It's a psychological term that people
backward. We're looking at the word usage backwards. And that is because when you use a word to describe a thing, the fact of the matter is you have not done anything to change or to imbue that thing with any character or change what the nature of it is. When you use a word to describe something outside of yourself, you're actually describing yourself and your relationship to that thing. There is no ability to imbue something with a character that it doesn't already have. So to say that something is divine is really a way of saying what I am in relationship to the universe. It is a way of saying that I kneel before this mysterious unknown of darkness and of light, of pain and of pleasure. I kneel before that thing, not because it is perfect, not because it is not problematic and horrible and horrific and shocking and fantastic and amazing at all these things. It's because my relationship is one of humility. That's what divinity, that's what calling the nature sacred is. It's not about,
we all have our own we all have our own takes on it and sort of redefining
in terms of the function of language. Basically what I'm saying is that you cannot define the thing outside of yourself. You are merely a function. Definition.
Yeah, but then it's just relative. So if I say that nature is undivine, then it's just a relative statement.
Then it shows that your position in terms of nature is not one of respect.
Your perception of that particular aspect of nature is probably accurate. Okay, Trick, ask me the questions if you can remember them, please.
Oh, you mean the three words that I found problematic?
Three or four. Yeah, 3 or 4.
Okay.
And then remember, I need to tell you why I use these words. There's a specific reason.
We're gonna skip over the God one for now because that's we're gonna.
Well, I want to answer that though. Because God represents the ultimate something. It represents the ultimate of anything. It's the highest ideal. It's the largest, most powerful, the greatest. It's sort of the ineffable concept that is it's the transcendent concept, that's in our minds, the construct that people instantly identify with, that there's something greater than us. And by definition,
the majority of people would say that there's a conscious being. Do you not agree with me on that?
Trick, I'm defining one aspect of this, defining one aspect of the term. Okay.
Yeah, but you can't define a word with one aspect and neglect the other aspects.
Sure, I understand, because the audience is still thinking they're associating their anthropomorphic concept with it. I get it. So all I'm saying is, for the general populace, though, the word God, coming from the German Gott, the German deity, it signifies every culture has a word for God. Every single culture, and there's a reason for that, because every single culture has a concept that there was a creator. Okay, that there is like a sustaining force or power, and that there are influences and powers that are greater than them. So that
not every single culture. There's some cultures that in like some tribes and stuff like that don't have these concepts, but that's beside the point.
There's never been a human culture that doesn't have a concept of God.
That's simply not true. That's simply not true. There's a tribe in I forget where now. I get to look up.
And I don't mean a theistic God. I mean a force that's all powerful.
I'm saying that they don't have any concept of the supernatural. This tribe. So
I'm not necessarily talking about a supernatural. This is another thing that atheists and materialists need to get through their head. I'm not talking about the supernatural. I'm talking about the creative power behind life. Am I yelling?
What do you mean by creative? What do you mean by creative?
The creative power behind the universe, behind the origin of the universe, behind the seasons, behind the weather, behind our body's biological.
So you mean causality? You mean physics causing things?
Physics, sure. The source of physics. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, let me say
that fit in your science brain.
The source of physics. So what is the source of physics? You're saying it's some creative thing.
I'm saying that the source of physics is the laws of nature itself, which we agree exist. And all I'm trying to say, I'm just trying to make one point, but I can't get through your.
But if you're saying just saying that there's no place or no culture in history that ever didn't realize that the universe existed. Yeah, I agree with you. You know what I'm saying?
It didn't have some concept or some word. There wasn't a culture that didn't have some word that represented the higher powers, the forces that operate, the forces that govern their lives. Where we came from.
I think I get what Poffo means. Like I think Poffo, what he's alluding to is that he's not saying every culture has always had a theistic concept of God, like the Abrahamic type of God. But what he's saying is that they've all had a belief in some origin, some first cause, some creator, as to answer questions of how they got here. Because we all think those questions sometimes, and in that sense, every culture's had that.
And there is a reason for that.
Some kind of creation story or mythology, sure.
Yeah, they have those.
And there's a reason for that, because something did create us. Something is creating us. It's a perpetual. It wasn't just a one-time
I just want to
event.
first say that every culture that has not haven't had a creation story. Like I said, there's certain tribes out there that have no creation myth, no creation.
Wait. Are we talking about modernity? I'm not talking about. I'm talking about historically in antiquity. I'm talking about like.
I don't agree with Trick anyway. There's no human that exists that doesn't have an idea of where they came from, whether it's accurate or not. They have to have some.
Well, we know where we came from. Our parents had sex.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to put it that way, yeah. I mean,
these are universal questions, so everyone has asked these universal questions, and there's a reason behind it, because there is a source and a cause, and it's nature. Okay, nature is the source, the universe. Nature being the local embodiment of those forces and powers.
Well, why call that God? Well, you see, you're
not
back
calling it God right now. I'm just trying to make the point that everybody recognizes that there are forces and powers beyond them. Can we just move on? I'm just trying to say that everyone recognizes.
Everybody recognizes that there's a nature that made them come into being. Sure.
That something made them come into being. Sure.
I've got a question. Okay, so if we look at the idea of causality, causality is generally understood as one thing hits another, and that causes the energy transfer from one
Yes.
object to the other, and you have causality. However, if you look at causality, it may not always be an issue of only things doing things to each other. There's also just conditionality itself. So it means that conditionality may set some of the parameters for what causation can occur. That also means that certain circumstances do not need to be causal agents to actually be present and involved.
Well, things have properties. Let's put it that way. So properties are what do the causing.
Okay, and we could say that there is a central property to the universe that basically is the groundwork for the universe to even exist in the first place, because we have a universe, so it exists.
Sure.
And there's been many people who've posited that, under all normal questions of probability, we should just be in a big gray fuzz of chaotic mess. Somehow we have something that's brought all of this into a tangible, meaningful, or maybe not so meaningful, but an order that we see around us. So there is an organizing principle to nature that we know, at least.
Well,
I agree.
Not a purposeful organization. That's
the
whole.
But that's hard to say.
This is a very important. When you use words like it's an organizational nature, people get the wrong impression. They think, oh, there's something organizing here. No, there's nothing organizing. It's just a causal process that leads to.
It's called the universe is organizing itself organismically. It is doing this. It is making things that we call solar systems, galaxies, planets, humans. It is peopling. So the universe has to have the nature of peopling within it to actually do that.
It has to have the peopling only when the people come about.
Trick, come out and say it. Just come out and say it. You are fearful of us personifying nature, correct?
Indeed. Well, I think it's not you guys personally. The language you're using is a personification, and it's problematic because other people are going to personify it. So
sure.
Divine.
Well, other people have been personifying nature for thousands of years, and that's why we have these traditional religions. And let me get this out. We're trying to bring the focus. We're trying to bring the focus back to nature and away from a supernatural world, so we can recognize the good and the bad and do exactly what you said as highly evolved, sentient sapient life forms who understand morality, to make the world a better place, to take responsibility, to be good stewards of the earth, to protect all life. Okay, that's the purpose. That's the reason behind this. We're getting away from the personification, which led to abstract concepts of a supernatural realm and anthropomorphic.
But when you say things like the nature is divine, then it turns things around and says I'm not looking at the bad. I'm looking at the good. I'm
But I'm not saying it to you. I'm saying it to people who are already pantheists, and I'm saying it to people who've come out of religion who understand this concept. And let me explain why I might use these highly charged words, and I use them in certain circles, and in other circles I don't use them. So let's go down the list. All I was trying to say before was everyone's had a concept of a god, traditionally throughout history, because something made them, something is the source of everything, something is greater than them. So everyone's had a word for that, for whatever that thing is, correct? Yes, let's move on.
The next word,
what was the
agree
next
with
word?
that.
But we could talk about a lot of different things of what people say God is. For example, the goddess. I like this. The goddess Ma'at she is one of the most prevalent Egyptian goddesses, and Ma'at only represents the idea of balance in the universe. And what I'm saying is that if you were to say that the universe is not intended to make Hitlers, and the universe wants to make Gandhis, I would say that's wrong. Is that the universe has just as much desire to make Hitlers as it has to make Gandhis. It's that we humans are the ones that get to decide that Gandhis are more, something that we want to perpetuate. And
I would say the universe has there's no desire, and it's not a desire at all. It's just the universe doing things. It's impartial. It's just the
but that's not
dumb
the
force
part.
Basically.
Because we as representations of the universe make the laws and rules of humanity because we ourselves have this nature within us. And so what I'm saying is that basically this notion of adopting a goddess such as Ma'at, it is not really believing in this goddess or God or anything. It's believing that we humans have to adopt a notion of human and organismic balance. And so that somebody like Hitler creates a result that is an imbalance for millions and millions of people. And therefore, it has to be rejected, not because the universe rejects it, but okay, in other words, not because the universe at large rejects it, but the universe within each of us. And that's what I think that's the hard part people aren't being able to see, is that we are representations of the universe. So therefore, our human laws are also universal laws.
What do you mean by balance? Because I don't know if I like you're saying...
Can I interject? Can I interject? This can go on forever. And honestly, Peter has a very metaphysical, symbolic, abstract way of looking at things, and Trick has the absolute opposite, rational, materialistic. So you guys, I really don't. This can take forever.
Mostly,
I want to go down the list. I've been trying for like an hour to just explain, my usage of these terms, and then Peter, if you could let me get this out, then you can talk and you can debate Trick for the rest of the show if you want.
Yes, you can say what you want, but what I'm saying is that your morality is great, and I think it's natural and necessary, but your morality is not coming from God. It's coming from your animal nature, and it's coming from your human nature. And I think that Trick agrees with that, and I would think that you agree with that. I don't know.
I think morality comes from people who are concerned about the welfare of conscious creatures. Sure,
but I would say morality comes from cause and effect. The observation of consequences, and the fact that we're a social species, we need to work together. So we have certain parameters that we have to follow. That's all. It's just that's a
Darwinian natural morality. And I think that's an outcropping of
I mean, this is good, but we've gotten a little off topic because, Poffo and you guys, the idea was to just describe, your use of the words, why you use these words, and that's what Poffo was trying to get at, but then we're lost in all this weird stuff about whether we believe the universe has a mind and has desires, and that stuff is kind of off topic. I find it interesting, but it's off.
We've had many shows about this before, and we could make whole shows dedicated to this. But I really just want to explain this
one word at a time. Sacred.
Yes, thank you.
Sacred, Poffo. Sacred.
Okay. Sacred means something that is special and unique and important and deserves our love and respect. That's sacred. My body is sacred. That's the best example I can give. I say the earth is sacred because it is of vital importance to our sustainability, to our success as a species.
Is there anything on this planet that is unsacred? That isn't sacred?
Everything comes from nature, and nature itself is sacred. But in this dialectical monistic paradigm, obviously there are differentiated, scattered forms that are juxtaposed, and there is contrast and distinction and polarity. And so there are certain aspects of this sacred nature that are harmful to other aspects of this sacred nature, and they're at odds and at war with itself. I'm explaining it. Well, they're at odds and they're at war with itself. But as they're at odds and at war with itself, it's also learning how to cooperate and coexist in balance and equilibrium with itself, and that is our job essentially to facilitate that.
So all harmful things on the planet Earth are sacred.
Did you hear anything I just said?
Yes, I heard exactly what you said, and
I just said
everything.
That the source of all things is sacred because it is what's producing the good as well as the bad. So we give.
You're not answering the question.
We give reverence and respect to it because it's the source of all the good aspects.
Is disease sacred? Is the AIDS virus sacred?
It's a product of nature. It's a aspect of nature that is out of sync with itself.
I know it. You're saying it's an aspect of nature, and you're saying nature is divine. I'm
explaining our responsibility to it. You're not yet understanding that like something can be beautiful in its imperfections, and yet it's it can still be steered an influence toward a more idealistic representation of itself. Does that
Honestly,
make sense?
I asked that question because I actually think you already answered it, but I wanted to get to see if you could wrap around. And you said that what is sacred is the things that are absolutely necessary for our own, they're of the highest level of importance for our own survival and our own being. And the reason why I brought up disease
and fulfillment and happiness, and sure, like to be able to thrive, live abundant.
Any of us knows that our own health, whether it be mind or body, is something that must be of the highest importance to us. So I would say that whether we call it sacred or not, it assumes the same thing. But I also would say that to have health, you cannot have healthy systems unless those systems, in fact, are capable of being in a state of non-health. And that basically non-health or systems, because they're complex, they involve, you could not have a human system without disease, because our systems are so absolutely complex that it's actually a type of, I would call it a more of Einsteinian miracle that we even exist and have health in the first place. But you couldn't have health unless you had a complex system that needs to be kept together, and you couldn't have a complex system without disease. Disease is part of.
I don't agree with this.
I think I understand.
We're talking about the dual aspect.
Yeah, excuse me. I think I understand. The only reason we would have the word health or healthy is because it's contrasted with something else that is unhealthy, that's non-health, and I think that's what's going on with this divine thing.
Yeah. It's the absence of ease.
But you don't need to have unhealth to have health.
Okay. I mean, back to the questions.
Yes,
back to the questions. Peter, please, I promise you guys can debate like on another episode. I promise.
Go ahead,
let me get through this. I just want to get through this.
Yeah, well, of course, but this could be the Poffo show the whole time. But
it's not about me. I'm trying to help Trick understand the usage of these words and why, and then you guys can actually discuss.
I want to get back to sacred. So like I said, because I'm not getting a clear answer on is our diseases sacred? Like would you say
our diseases are unwanted aspects?
That's not answering the question.
They're undesirable. But I am answering the question.
Are they sacred? Yes or no? Sacred.
The sacred aspect comes from the source, like biology. It's like a sacred science because it's the most important. I answered the question. I said something that is special and unique and important and valuable. That's my definition.
I don't speak for you,
right?
Poffo, but I think I can answer his question better. Is that
okay.
You're saying is disease is sacred? I would say that the process of human beings becoming what we are and the process of our evolution is a sacred process in itself because it is so much intrinsic and important and necessary to our entire being, as Poffo pointed out.
I agree.
But as far as whether or not disease is a good thing, no, I don't think it's a good thing, but it is a necessary part of that sacred process. You cannot have the process of us complex trillion-celled organisms without, much of our body comes from symbiosis that occurred between bacteria, viruses, and our cells. So we are disease. Disease is part of this sacred, this necessary process for us.
I would say it's a necessary part of experience. Yeah, and in order to have experience,
we could imagine a perfect world where we exist without any diseases. I mean, we could imagine that
anything unless we already had those diseases to begin with. We actually couldn't.
We could only have that
perfect
reality.
We can imagine that. I'm saying.
We can, but you wouldn't have the capacity to if you didn't already experience those negative aspects.
We know that we don't need certain diseases to survive. Like we know that if
from this moment forward, sure, from this point forward, evolution.
There's nothing that requires the AIDS virus for survival of living creatures on planet Earth.
But the planet developed with the AIDS virus. The planet
it did, sure. It's part of the causal process. But I'm asking you because you're saying nature is divine or all life is sacred. I'm asking you, are these things sacred? Are they?
I'm asking you to get it in your head, get it in your brain. Again, I love you, Trick. Just listen. Just get it in your head that by viewing it as sacred, you develop a deeper appreciation for it, and you end up respecting it. And you end up, it's benevolent for society. That's what I'm trying to say.
I'm saying by viewing it as sacred is allowing people to say, oh, well, all of nature is sacred. We don't need to fix nature. Nature's already sacred. That
You know
is
what?
the problem that I see.
I'm going to concede for a second. Hold on. I'm going to concede for a second because I'm going to go ahead and jump on your side for a second, Trick, and play like sort of devil's advocate against myself. I deal with this a lot. I deal with this, and Peter will know what I'm talking about. I deal with this sort of abstract, sort of foo-foo, wishy-washy, selective morality, moral relativism, where, you know, everything is divine, all is God, there is no good or evil. Oh, it doesn't matter, you know, if I eat a vegetable or I slaughter a pig because it's all divine. I agree. There should be distinction, and I agree that mentality absolutely should be, inhibited. I am not promoting that. I am not. That should be absolutely rejected. Okay. I have to deal with this all the time. I have to like continuously like kind of wake people up and bring them back to reality and say, you know, you don't live behind a computer screen. You could say all this stuff philosophically, it sounds great, but what's the practical application of it? Like, so I agree with you. I know what you're worried about. I know what you're concerned with. Okay. But just for a moment, look at it from my perspective. And we're talking about people who are non-religious, essentially, okay, who are scientists, who are skeptics, who are humanists, okay, and they don't have any kind of poetic sort of metaphysical connection to something greater, and yet there is something greater all around them, and it's the natural world. And if we can highlight that fact, it will lead to environmentalism. It will lead to veganism. It will lead to a mentality of biocentrism and deep ecology that will then help to just basically heal our world and unite us as a species. And that's what I'm working.
Let me ask you this though, Poffo. Can people have that same sentiment without assuming that the universe? Without
using the words or
yeah.
without. Yes,
without using the problematic words of sacred and divine.
Yes, absolutely, because Trick already has it. That's the point right there.
That's what I'm saying is that these words are not necessary.
No, they're not. They're not necessary at all. But I'm in a pantheist community where this is the language that they use, and it's perfectly fine. It's okay. You understand? And I'm also
pushing forward. When it comes to nature, that it's not really up to us to decide what is the better parts of nature or the worst parts of nature, what we think is good or what's bad. And that part of this notion of what is divine is really comes down to not so much what is good or bad for people as much as what is necessary for this world to exist. And I would posit that very much in my life, I've had this big thing about, well, what do we do about animals, and we have to be very careful. What about, say, for example, mosquitoes or all parasites? These are afflictions that cause endless pain and suffering. But what if we erased them? Would the ecosystem survive? And in a lot of ways, that what these parasites do and what disease does is it actually enhances the robustness of the system. So therefore, without disease, the system itself disease is a correctional aspect of our systems. Disease is its own kind of medicine in its own way.
Challenges and difficulties make us stronger.
One I never heard before.
Diseases find their own niche, but they don't. They're not a necessity for an ecosystem.
They have gotten rid of the things that are basically the weaker genetic expression.
And if they didn't do that, then it would just be a different evolutionary path, as all.
Okay, let's move on.
It would just niche on
there is no such thing as an evolutionary path without these things. There's no such thing as evolution without these. That's ridiculous. Obviously,
it's not necessary. It's not needed.
Part of evolution.
It's a part of evolution because it happened. Because evolution,
right, but not because it needs to happen.
Every disease, look, even if you got to a new level of pure organismic health or something, you're going to create another layer of disease because any systems.
Hold on, guys. Okay. This is very strange because once again we've gotten off the topic of these words and what they mean and why we use them, and then we're discussing about whether mosquitoes are important to the ecosystem.
This is the same topic. We're talking about whether or not nature is sacred, and we're
Peter. It's all relative. Yeah, it's all relative. But I still haven't gotten through that list. I know it's all interrelated. It's all interrelated.
And wait. Can I just say one thing? Even if, and it's not true, but even if it was a requirement of life, then that would just show the problematic the problematic nature of nature. It would just say that it was less divine than it is. It wouldn't say it was more divine. It would say it was less sacred.
Yeah,
because of this
I
problematic
understand
nature it
where
has.
It is what it is. It's beautiful.
Tricks.
It is what it. It is what it
See,
is. It's
that's the
amazing.
other word,
It's
beautiful.
miraculous.
Beauty in nature. Like, are we talking about all nature here, or are we talking about just certain aspects of nature?
Just the fact
Get
that
back to the question.
Just the
Back
fact
to
that
the
one
questions.
hummingbird exists, that
Please.
all of nature produces a hummingbird, tells me that nature must be divine.
And it also produces animals getting eaten alive every second of every moment.
Well,
Absolutely.
okay,
that's not
okay.
beautiful. Sorry.
I have something. Okay, I have something to say now here. Now, of course, I understand where Trick is coming from because I've used certain words as problematic. However, the word divine itself to me doesn't have any particular meaning. It doesn't necessarily mean good or bad. Divine just, coming from a Christian background as I did, divine just meant that something came from God or it was part of God's plan, which said nothing about the good or badness, the positive or negativeness of it. So what's interesting is this comes down to words because we're talking about words, and one person may use the word divine in one context, somebody else may mean something entirely unrelated by the same word. So then how do we get to say what the correct meaning of the word divine, for example? I'm trying to get down to the really nitty-gritty details.
It depends on who we talk to. It depends on who we talk to and who is offended and who understands. That's the bottom line. Please finish asking the questions.
The bottom line is the people who use these words are defining their position. They're not defining the thing outside of themselves. They're defining their relationship with it. And I think that by doing what you just said, Chandler, is that those people are saying that their position to the universe is seeing everything as coming from this divine source, or it's basically saying that I kneel before the universe. And
next question.
You don't have to be a theist.
Next word, please.
Okay, what was the next word?
Same thing. Divinity and sacred are the same.
Oh,
Trick,
yeah.
next word.
Holy is the next word.
Holy. They're almost interchangeable, sacred and holy. And this is from my perspective, a biopantheist perspective. Okay, I'm not speaking from a theistic perspective. I'm not speaking from a monotheistic or a Christian or a Muslim or a Jewish perspective. From a pantheist perspective, a biological pantheist, holy is almost interchangeable with sacred, but there is kind of there may be more of a association to a location or sort of something external, something physical, like this is a holy place. I mean, you could say it's a sacred place too, but the idea, it could be the idea of, a ritual or an activity or something that you're doing that is, it's a location or an activity that is of utmost importance. So it takes priority. There should be great respect in this thing, whatever this is. So there's my definition.
So it's pretty much the same as sacred, because that's the way you gave for sacred,
right? But it's also it has to do with process too, like the process of something.
You use a number of words. You use these words: important. You say deserving of our respect. These are the type of words you use. So why not just say that these things are important or respect?
Trick. When I talk to you, I promise you, I can just use those words. But we're talking about why I use them in my group. So if I'm speaking to you, and I want to do this so bad, guys, I want to have just a show where it's me and Trick and Chandler and whatever, and I'm just using Trick's words, and we're having a beautiful, colorful, delightful, productive conversation, and we're just using the words that Trick understands.
Listen, I think there's a big difference though between going to an art show and saying, "Oh, I really like this. I appreciate the work. This guy's a master. This guy's that." And this artist does this to me. That's one thing. Okay, it's another thing to go to an art show and just say, "I was beside myself. It changed my worldview. It changed who I am, and I had a mystical experience viewing this art." And when I say mystical experience, it's merely, I don't mean something that is magical. I mean something that's transformative. on a non-rational level. And if you are experiencing the world as whole, it is transformative to you on a non-rational level. That is not just about, oh, well, I appreciate this and I care about it and I know it's necessary, blah, 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 blah. It's something where you internally understand a certain thing. It changes you.
Inspiration. There's inspiration involved. There's like a life-changing sort of transcendent. Yes, it's deep. The deepest emotions, the most idealistic concepts and notions are being evoked. Sure, that's you. When I you walk into a forest, and I see that these old growth trees, these gigantic redwoods they're so enormous and they're so still and quiet, and you feel like you're entering a cathedral. I mean, that's holy.
Okay.
That place.
So you guys are talking about you guys are talking about these words as some personal thing, and that's fine. That's fine. You can have
talking about it the way
yes, but then when you promote the divinity, or you promote the holiness or the sacredness of things, you're not promoting your own opinion on them. You're promoting that these states are. You're basically saying these states are these things.
We're not making objective statements about reality. We're not making objective statements about reality that everyone ubiquitously experiences. We're making personalized, subjective statements that can be misconstrued depending on the audience. I understand and I agree. But the purpose of this, is to give a new perspective of the natural world, to create a greater appreciation for the natural world, which will lead to greater and greater levels of awareness of the extraordinary nature of life, which leads to appreciation, can overcome depression, and eventually, obviously, it's conservation. It's love and respect for life, and a more sustainable existence. That's always
it affects our decision as to whether we do certain things or whether we don't, and why we do or don't. And I think that a scientist, for example, who understands and upholds the idea of the sacred, will not perform certain types of experiments, whereas somebody who doesn't understand the idea of the sacred will do things that they just switch something off inside themselves.
On a chimp, on a dog, they use little puppies because they're so they're so easy, they're so personable, they're so trusting and stuff. It's horrible. Yeah, I mean, who would dissect an animal, or who would experiment on an animal? Who would torture or castrate a baby pig if they viewed life as sacred and holy?
A lot of scientists work on trying to solve problems in nature. So they look at nature and they say these are problems that exist in nature. They don't say nature is sacred, so why I don't want to change something sacred. Why would anybody want to change something sacred?
It should sort of steer their values and their methodology, like as exactly what Peter was saying. It should actually help to kind of influence and guide their actions so that they're not doing things that are so completely disconnected and apathetic and destructive. That's the point. It's a guiding principle so that.
But why would they even want to change something in nature? Is what I'm asking. So why would they want to change a problem?
Because you're missing the fundamental dichotomy, that the duality that exists within this unity. That's what you're still not understanding. That there are aspects that we desire to change. They're undesirable. That are not beneficial to the individual.
How could something sacred be undesirable?
Okay, for example, let me just jump in. Is that I feel like, okay, look at it as a garden, or look at your body as, in terms of health and medicine. Is that the ideal state is to have everything growing and healthy as best as possible. But you understand also that you can't, a monoculture where you've just hit everything with pesticides, that's not ultimately the most healthy system. Ecosystems are systems that require a variety of different components, and some of those are necessary, but of a non-ideal. They're not ideal. So you're constantly dealing with a compromised systems that require. Going back to the idea of parasites, if you get rid of all these insects, well, now you've created another problem for the system. So it turns out that as much as insects seem very inconvenient and really a pain in the ass, and we don't love insects, to get rid of them, suddenly you've completely undermined your entire system, because the system is complex in this way. And so complex systems theory understands that the pieces, the undesirable pieces, cannot just be eradicated.
And yet we still, they're like in certain areas, they're injecting mosquitoes with a virus that they spread to other mosquitoes through the blood supply, basically, to prevent malaria in certain areas.
Look, I'm just saying that the idea of the sacred is sometimes to point out something that is not immediately perceivable. And so you have people that are visionaries that see the bigger systems, and they point out, well, no, this part of the system seems wrong and seems bad, but you can't just attack it and remove it, like removing predators from a ecosystem. It's like, oh, well, it seems by getting rid of the wolves, then all the deer will multiply, they'll shit more, the grass will love it, and everything will be happy. No, it doesn't work that way. Is that basically you get rid of the predators, now you've undermined the system. So yes, the top predators are part of that sacred balance.
Okay, well, look, guys. Okay, now you're getting into some interesting stuff about what we should or should not do and interfering with nature and all that stuff. That's nice and all, but the real question is, why do we describe something as sacred or unsacred, divine or undivine, or God or not God?
Because it's necessary for balance.
I would say because of our motivation.
What do you mean by balance? This is the second time Peter brought up this balance word.
Trick, please hold on. Just 1 second. I never lose my train of thought.
Health is balance. Same thing. Health and balance. That's all.
What did you just say? Just backtrack for a minute. You just said.
You realize that animals go extinct all the time. There's more extinct animals there are today than there are non-extinct animals. I mean,
according to our linear timeline, but according to the age of the universe, life completely trumps and supersedes all. Okay, everything is coming from this anthropocentric perspective, Trick, which is good on a certain level when it comes to pain and suffering, minimizing pain and suffering, and maximizing, our propensity to flourish and thrive. But at the same time, you're so myopic, man. Like you need to expand your mind and look at things on a systems model. Look at things as they actually are, according to nature. Nature is our guide. Nature is not our guide in terms of morality.
But
nature is our guide in terms of everything. And morality, obviously, morality came from nature because we are products of nature.
That's a naturalistic fallacy. I mean, yes.
Morality came out of nature. It came out
empathy
of nature.
Came out of nature, not morality.
Right.
But yes.
Morality,
hold on, guys.
Is the ultimate.
By the way.
See, I'm trying to get down to the meaning of these actual words themselves and figure out if there's a meaning. And I'm trying to be unemotional about it. I'm really trying here. Because it seems like we have a tendency to get emotional about certain things. Some things are more positive or negative, but the actual meanings themselves is what I'm trying to get at. Because are we in a system of word relativism where each person just uses the word in their way? And, but I feel like we need commonality. We need agreed upon usage of these words.
Well, hold on. Okay.
I agree.
Let me respond to that. Okay, so this whole conversation is very connected to the philosophy of Wittgenstein, and he's one of my favorite philosophers. And he does say that basically there are words that we're using that are accurate reflections of reality, therefore they're useful, and then there's words that we're using that are not accurate reflections of reality. But you cannot just come to everybody agreeing on these terms until you hash it out. That's also the Hegelian synthesis. It's not really his philosophy, but this idea of the dialectic of reason is an attempt at constantly comparing notes and then coming to our best conclusion of what terms make the most sense. So this is the necessary process of that Hegelian
right. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to hash this out, but like I would say that a lot of these words that you guys are using are becoming trivial. That you're trivializing these words. You're making them meaningless.
I think that's the opposite. I think Poffo and I are trying to reintroduce meaning into words that have become trivialized. But I think that for Poffo and I, obviously, they're not trivial to us. And
I'm saying
really, you're trying to reintroduce an enlightened perspective, trying to reintroduce like an alternative perspective into these things which are considered mundane or ordinarily
Yeah,
take it for granted.
when you look at the all-consuming everything, and you say that includes the negatives, the really harsh negatives that exist, and you're saying these words are attached to everything.
And when you do the opposite, what you end up having, and when you do the opposite, you end up having Iranian dualism. You end up having a god and a devil. When you do the opposite, you end up creating religions and
that is
literally
more accurate.
demonizing.
No.
Demonizing
it's more
certain
accurate.
aspects.
It's not about demonizing. It's about
idealizing
looking at the nature. It's about saying that this nature can't be described as divine. This nature can't be described as this certain aspect of nature. Other aspects, sure. There's a lot of aspects that you can consider divine or sacred or whatever, or any.
But that's what I've been saying. That's exactly what I've been saying the whole time. Some aspects are more ideal.
Okay,
let me go back to the hummingbird.
Can we take a step back? Okay.
Everything to allow the hummingbird to exist.
Yeah. Okay. Can we take a step back? See, earlier in this podcast, Trick asked Poffo if there was anything that is undivine. And see, what's interesting, and now Poffo gave him a long string of words. I don't remember exactly all of it, but you would think this would be a one-word answer, yes or no, and then the explanation would follow. You know, that's what it seems like Can we first get back to that? Is it yes or no that there are some things that are undivine? Because I'm still on that one. I still have that on my mind here.
Okay, those words are all descriptive adjectives that are identifying various aspects, for a specific purpose of the same unified whole, of the same thing. So they're descriptive adjectives that are useful, when focusing on certain aspects for an altruistic, beneficent reason. That's the purpose. So if you want me to give a straight yes or no answer to these things, it's like you're missing the point. But I can do that if you want to go back and do it again. No, nothing is divine because there is pain and suffering. Okay? And no, nothing is really sacred because it's all temporary and it's not going to last forever, and everything causes enormous amounts of struggle and suffering and harm. And no, nothing is really holy because nothing is really eternal or ideal. So if you really want to look at it in that way, no. But all of these things have aspects to them that are temporal, and maybe it's because they're temporary, and maybe it's because they're so transitory and elusive that we cling to them and that they become so special. It is the transitory and permanent nature of life that actually imbues it with sanctity and value and worth. And we talked about this on our last episode. This is exactly the point of, the idea of not believing in an afterlife puts so much importance on this life and on what we do and on the moment. So everything that we're talking about comes down to like adjectives describing the same experience of life for a specific purpose. So my purpose in labeling those things is to give value and meaning and worth for the conclusion of veganism and wildlife conservation and love and respect for life and people.
I think Poffo. Okay, I want to respond to Poffo here. Okay, so I think I agree with Poffo's motivation with his goals about this and all. But maybe I'm just too stupid to understand this. I don't know what this is, but it seems to me that we could take an approach and say this over here is divine for XYZ reason. This over here is not divine for ABC. We can do that. It seems like we could do that, and we could declare some things divine or sacred and other things not. For example, I would do that. For example, I would say that all animals, all living things are sacred to me because I'm that way. Like I have respect for life, and I don't want to kill anything. I don't even want to kill insects. I try to avoid it, But at the same time, a book, just ink and paper, just a book is not sacred to me at all because I know it's just mass produced. It's just not alive in and of itself. So it's less sacred to me than a living being. So I categorize things into sacred and non-sacred, although I may not use the word sacred in my speech. I get that concept, and that's my approach. That makes sense.
That's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine, and that's exactly what these words are. They're descriptors identifying all these different aspects based on the necessity to them in our lives. I mean, because I could also say that the ideas presented in that book are absolutely 100% valuable and sacred and necessary. They need to be preserved because of what transpires at the conclusion when someone puts those thoughts and ideas into action, how it could literally revolutionize a society or a culture. So the ideas themselves, which are in that book, is therefore a medium. I could also say the book itself, which is mass produced, it doesn't really have value. You can burn it if you need to, you need warmth for fire or whatever. You can give it away. But the tree that produced the pages and the binding of that book is sacred, because that's a representation of life. That tree was so old and it existed there, and it has within it the divine life principle that allowed it to grow and spread, and it gave life and sanctuary to all these little critters. And you see what I'm trying to say? So the tree itself that the book is made from is actually more valuable to me. I would say the ideas in the book and then what the book is made of is what would be considered sacred.
I would agree, because the reason it becomes sacred or respectful or whatever you might call it is because the content of that book, if it can benefit living creatures, then it becomes useful. Whereas
it all goes back to biology. Yeah, it all goes back to biology. It all goes back to
it goes back to benefit, not biology. What Chandler's trying to
who the hell is benefiting except biological organisms?
Right.
The benefit is toward the organism.
But that's important, because if you have a book that doesn't benefit, if you have a book that makes things worse, then that book is the opposite.
It's undivine.
It's the utilitarian purpose. The reason, the focus and the emphasis. And I used to say there is nothing intrinsically wrong with any symbol or sigil or glyph or sign. There's nothing evil in like images themselves. It's the intention behind it. It's the perception or the impact that it creates. When a person is viewing it. Like a symbol. I'm looking at Peter's symbol, and you guys see my symbol, maybe the tree of life. That's a powerful symbol that represents the continuity and regeneration and the toroidal cycle of energy flow. So it's a powerful thing. And someone else would say the 5-pointed star is evil, but we know that in pagan cultures it was a symbol of protection, representing the 5 elements. So it's all about the human subjective interpretation and how sort of the majority views something. So let's get back to language. Was there any other question?
Well, you kind of conceded in this discussion that these words are subjective and they only relate to certain like. Of
course,
you
they
could
are.
say certain things.
I've never said that anything is dogmatically.
Then when you say something like nature is divine or all life is sacred, not just life is sacred. You say all life is sacred, like there's nothing problematic with life at all in certain aspects of life or anything.
I agree with you. Okay, that a serial killer or a child molester, a pedophile, a rapist, someone who's abusing and enslaving animals, obviously. I see the life principle that's in them that allowed them to form into the complex being that they are as sacred. I see that particular manifestation, their makeup, their physiology that causes them to be the deviant, destructive, violent, selfish being that they are. I'm not going to honor and respect that individual because they're a danger to society or they're
right.
If you say something,
you make the distinction.
If you could have turned off that one individual, like make that individual not happen because of all the bad things, whatever the kid, the child rapist or something like that. If you can make that person not happen, then you would do that, because you can't say that person is in that under the umbrella of something divine or sacred. Because if you do, then you'd say, oh, then I wouldn't turn off that person. There'd be.
But okay.
There would be,
What do you mean by turn off? Turn on?
if you could,
Like,
if you had a special button to
I'd
say,
like to
not,
say
that
something.
person's not going to come into
If
existence.
if my opinions, if I
sure,
can't
I
ever
would-
speak, I'll let you guys go ahead and just have the floor.
Go ahead, Peter.
But I recall these conversations in the beginning that one of the reasons why causality was being, and determinism was being promoted was the idea that certain people, it's to give us some insight as to why it is that people have motivations that we may not agree with, but that we can kind of understand and have some sympathy with. And I thought that was an interesting perspective on determinism. And I do think that this conversation is kind of like now taking the opposite tact where, you're not being consistent because, okay, so Poffo mentioned a lot of the things that he was saying about what, his views on what is sacred and admitting that not everything is. But if we talk about pantheism as it was conceived in the beginning by Giordano Bruno and by Spinoza, they had a different view, and it was and very much at the center, I believe, of pantheism.
This is the Stoic, this is the Stoicism of accepting both.
If we want to get to the heart of pantheism, that we have to look past dualism, and this whole thing about saying a criminal is bad and we should try to, look, obviously we live in a dualistic world, and I don't think that we can just.
It's not about being blameworthy, Peter. It's about consequentialism. So if we could turn off the person before they even come into existence,
I think the notion of that to start with is faulty because you're doing some sort of minority report predicting this kind of thing.
This is eugenics.
Peter
is very much against eugenics.
It's hypothetical.
No. Like, for example, let's put time travel in here. Okay, hold on, guys. This isn't just about. Okay, hold on, guys. This isn't just about just guessing and predicting. This is imagine that we know what someone has done, and we have the opportunity to go back in time and somehow change events so that they don't end up doing that sort of thing. We're just doing something because we saw that something was harmful, and then of course we can't do that. But assuming we could, and we could go back in time and change events, would we do that because it's undesirable what that person did? It has nothing to do with that person being blameworthy or anything.
Okay, hey Chandler and Trick, can we do that right now? No, we can't. So it's irrelevant. That's my take on it.
It's relevant to the conversation about the problems. It's relevant to the conversation that there's these things that we shouldn't be labeling as a positive.
Let Peter speak and say what he wanted to say, but I just want to ask real quick, was there another word, Trick, or was that it? Were those all the words?
Let's see. God, divine, sacred, holy. Beauty was that was like a little iffy there, but that's about it. Spiritual, I guess, is another one, but
okay, we'll come back to it. Peter, say everything you wanted to say.
We could have a whole show on those things. I mean, Poffo has his take. I have biosophy. My philosophy has a very specific take on each one of those terms, but we don't have time for that. What I wanted to get back to with the whole non-duality aspect is that we don't say that the murderer, now that he's taken his options and shown a history of problems, now we know that problems exist and are related to this individual. But what I'm saying is that to not recognize that there are certain aspects that make up every person, and including murderers, that, to the idea of what it is that makes evil in the universe. For example, the Christians have always pointed out this idea of Satan as the great rebel or the great enemy, the enemy, the oppressor, whatever. But the fact is that in nature and in the world, there's always needs to be this thing that goes against the norm and is something that challenges what is good. And therefore, again, just going by the basic ideas of pantheism, that everything, because it's the pan, everything is divine, and it does include the idea that even this impulse to murder is part of the divine. It is part of the divine picture, and no, it is not something that serves us. So what is divine may not serve us, but it's part.
And
that's what I mean by trivial. Like
that gets down to redefining what divine means. Really.
Well, that's what I mean. It turns the word divine into something trivial. Like you might as well just say gazinka gazoink, because it doesn't make any. It's just
the fundamental part of this conversation is that this, for me, and this is my last thing I want to put in there as my point, is that it fundamentally changes the observer. It changes who you are. If you say that the universe, including the wrong, is part of the divine plan. You now put yourself in a place to view everything with a certain level of acceptance, and not only acceptance, but a position where you're ready to step in to do the right thing at the right time if necessary. That's all. It's really,
what do you mean by the right
there's
thing?
a lot of nuance. There's a lot of nuance in there, Peter. There are a lot of people would probably miss though, because it can be taken as complacency and this sort of stoic attitude that, oh well, it doesn't matter,
Exactly.
Like, what did Spinoza say on his deathbed? What was the last thing he said?
All I'm saying is that by saying that,
oh come on, you're gonna not quote that great quote? It's perfect. What did Spinoza say? What was his last words?
Actually, it's not coming to my mind right at this moment. Why don't you refresh us?
Now I'm going to have to paraphrase it because I don't exactly remember it. Do not protest, do not grieve, understand.
Okay, and that's yes, I would say that's what I'm saying is that this is a kind of loving understanding when you've come to love the whole, including the ugly warts and everything. And by loving the whole, it puts you in a different attitude towards everything, and that's
we could understand something without loving it. We could even not blame it without loving it.
I disagree because I think that love is that essential aspect of curiosity and care, and that if you don't love something, that really you're giving it short shrift.
You don't have to love like somebody that is a serial killer. You don't have to love them.
I'm saying to love the serial killer. What I'm saying is to love the idea of justice, to love the idea that a serial killer should not necessarily just be beaten by the crowd because we've decided they're a serial killer. It's called a love. It's a love for something. For example, your love for rationalism goes beyond the pale. You're completely dedicated to you. I would define rationalism as being a divine thing, and I think that you should just be able to pass that along to a wider variety of things.
If we say that I love when animals get eaten alive in the wild because it's part of nature, then why do anything about animals getting eaten alive in nature? If we say I love diseases because it's part of nature, why try to cure diseses?
Okay. That's a good question, and I don't think that we should necessarily go about trying to go, stopping predators. When you're watching a nature video, you would be like, "Why the fuck did you just stop that cheetah from having its dinner? It needs dinner." Of course, that's
okay. So this is where we disagree.
Yeah, we disagree heavily with Peter on this.
On a fundamental moral level, we disagree here. But let's just talk about diseases then. Let's talk about diseases then.
Systems-wise, that you're not doing a service to the system.
So systems-wise, the diseases thin out populations. So why are we curing diseases?
Quickly, I just want to say real quick, I fall somewhere in between Peter and Trick's position because I do hold some transhumanist notions, and I do believe eventually we will eliminate death. I believe that that's the direction we're headed. But I do also believe that there should be greater respect for the process. We always have to maintain respect for the process and view the good, the bad, the ugly as all significant parts of the whole. But that doesn't mean that we don't take responsibility to redirect and guide our own evolution.
But I think that we do that,
greater,
we do that for ourselves. We guide evolution not for evolution's sake, but for human's sake, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But within biotheism, myself, I consider that which is holy, that which is untouched by humans. So, in other words, everything that is going about doing its own thing without our intervention, that's what's holy.
A lot of ethicists, Peter, especially like utilitarians, aren't just concerned about humans. They're concerned about all species that have the ability to suffer or experience pain. So if we take just a human ethic, then a lot of people would say that's a speciesist account. You're taking a speciesist account of suffering.
Well, no, it's taking responsibility only for our own condition. And the fact is that
right, that's the same thing.
Well, right.
Our own is more important than other species.
Okay, so it's not our job now that we've gotten to be sentient to come in there and redirect the external nature and its evolution. However,
sure it is. Sure it is. If it was human children in the wild getting eaten by other animals, we'd do something about it. But the fact that it
starts with us. I think it should start with us, and then it will eventually, spill over into the rest of the animal kingdom, or we'll go off world
But
and
it's not
have
our
a
job. It's not
utopia
only not our
society
job.
and let the animal kingdom.
We're the
go through
only
this
ones
process.
that can have the capacity to do this, Peter. We're the only ones.
What I'm
We
saying
have
is,
the.
is our job
Yeah.
is to.
Right now we are.
Okay. Okay, look, guys, I'm out of time, so we really need to
Okay.
wrap this up. But I just wanted to say I'm more in alignment with Trick on this. I mean, I'm just afraid that people will become complacent and just accept all the bad things and not do anything about it. So I share his concern on that.
Do
But
Poffo and I seem complacent? I mean, I don't think. That
Yeah,
that's-
we're the exact opposite, man.
Well,
We're
I know,
most
but what's interesting
passionate,
is
you know.
that's the thing is that I'm just afraid that with the public it will lead to that attitude and they'll just accept things and
Doesn't he
go
sound
about.
just like me,
That's
Peter?
where we
He sounds just
disagree.
like me, doesn't he? That's what I'm always talking about when I don't like Peter's association with the various world religions, and I'm always saying the same exact thing to him, and you sound just
Right.
like, you know.
Yeah,
should-
I'm just very
Chandler,
concerned.
if you need to go, could we keep going for a little while?
I actually got to go too, guys. At 9
Yeah,
o'clock
I
is
think
kind of my cutoff.
what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to continue this very same discussion in future episodes. What we're gonna have to do, we're gonna have to continue this because
Rick and
we
Peter
haven't.
debate.
We have not hashed this out, so we're gonna continue this other times.
Yeah, we can't let you Poffo and Peter just go on, without me and Chandler, because otherwise.
No, I didn't know you had to. I didn't know you had to go, Trick. Well, obviously, we need a.
Yeah, because this is an endless conversation, but yeah, so we'll continue this in the future. So yeah, now as far as a closing for this, I'm not even sure where to begin on closing this. This was chaotic, and we'll have to think of a title and description that matches this well. But anyway, so you've been listening to Philosophy, Science, and Religion, and we started out talking about words, or at least we tried to. And we got caught up in these words: sacred, divine, holy. I think there were other words. I can't remember all the words, but we've been trying to go through these words, but then we got sidetracked. But I think we may be coming close to understanding, and we're going to continue this in future episodes because this conversation is far from over. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.